But they weren't, and the victory was by no means as decisive as the minstrels claimed. On the continent, they weren't even sure that the English had won. Facts? What facts? Minstrels in the service of a great lord would be entitled to wear the lord's uniform, or livery. A minstrel without a livery was a bit like a rock band without a record contract. Livery indicated a minstrel had both status and a regular income. Of course, when he wasn't entertaining his own master, it was all the easier to get those classy gigs. Mark you, the entertainment these great lords demanded was reassuringly down market, even in the royal courts.
Henry II's favourite minstrel, for example, went by the name of Roland le Péteur. Henry rewarded Roland with 30 acres of land for his great masterwork, described as a leap, a whistle, and a fart. It appears that Roland's great musical talent lay in farting tunes.
These were not highbrow entertainers. Have a look at what's going on here. Everyone's looking at everyone else. These guys are looking at these guys, and they're looking at the king, who's counting down 1, 2, 3, wait for it.
Another act that was apparently popular with royalty was a variation of sticking your head in the lion's mouth. Only this involved a minstrel who spread honey on his member and then brought in a performing bear. What the bear actually performed isn't mentioned, but I bet it doesn't figure in Winnie the Pooh.
Maybe it's not surprising that some disapproved of the way the wealthy encouraged low comedy. Here is John of Salisbury writing in the 12th century. Even those whose exposures are so indecent they make a cynic blush are not debarred from distinguished houses. They are not even turned out when, with more hellish tumult, they defile the air and more shamelessly disclose that which in shame they should have concealed. But minstrels were woven into the fabric of everyday life. The town of Beverly in East Yorkshire was a major centre for pilgrimage in the Middle Ages. And minstrels would stand here on the steps of the north porch of the Minster as a sort of permanent welcoming committee for arriving tourists. In fact, the whole town was crawling with minstrels. And when they decorated the inside of the Minster, they filled it with minstrels. The Beverly figures offer us a unique glimpse into the world of the medieval minstrel. Here we come face to face with musicians whose humble lives went otherwise unrecorded.
These figures provide us with a veritable encyclopedia of minstrelsy. They show us what instruments minstrels played. They show us how those instruments worked. And they show us what minstrels wore, and even what some people thought about minstrels.
Players of wind instruments seem to have been regarded as rather vulgar, perhaps because the blowing distorted their features. The church itself had an ambivalent attitude to minstrels. On one hand, there were the heavenly minstrels, angels who played celestial music. But on the other, there were minstrels who encouraged dancing and ribaldry and were therefore servants of the devil. In England, the fortunes of the minstrels probably reached their zenith in the reign of Edward II. Edward, whose father tended to be away rather a lot, was brought up by a nanny whose other job just happened to be a court minstrel. Maybe this explains why Edward grew up as one of the biggest fans minstrels ever had. I went to the Public Records Office to riffle through some 600-year-old documents in search of evidence of Edward's minstrel craze.
Here, for example, is the treasury roll for his coronation, so it's a list of expenses for the coronation. And it lists here
all the minstrels at the coronations, 154 of them. You can see there's 5 trumpeters of the boy prince, Thomas the harpist, William the harper, Henry the flautist, Tanin the organist, and here we've got little William, organist of the Countess of Hereford. Sounds all very lavish, but conventional. But then the coronation was a state occasion. In private, however, it seems that Edward enjoyed something a little more spicy. This is the wardrobe account in which all the king's personal expenditure was kept. Here we can see on the anniversary of the death of Piers Gaveston, his intimate friend and perhaps lover, he employed a certain Bernard the Fool and his 54 naked dancers. While the English nobility were still getting their kicks out of stories about who killed who and how far their brains were spread around in the process, down in the south of France, a new kind of song was evolving. It was subtle, sophisticated, and sexy. The pioneer of this new style of poetry was not a professional musician. He was an aristocrat, the gloriously randy Duke William IX of Aquitaine, and his palace was here in Poitiers. If not the most rampant of French noblemen, Duke William was certainly the most upfront about it. He talked of opening an abbey for prostitutes near his castle, and confessed that he pursued women with but one objective in mind. I'll end up with my hand up a cloak. He was the first of a new breed of court entertainer, aristocratic and educated, the troubadours. And by the 12th century, the court here at Poitiers was the most important cultural centre in France. It was here that Duke William changed forever the story of the minstrel. He invented a new kind of poetry that raved about his favourite subjects, love and sex. His style was irreverent, witty, and made fun of everything, including himself. I made these verses just for fun, not for myself, nor anyone, nor of great deeds that knights have done, nor of lovers true. I made them riding in the sun, and my horse here too. The troubadours revolutionized the way people thought about the sexes. They accorded women superiority over men, and they made love a suitable subject for fiction. Up to this time, it had been punishable by death to address a love song to a married woman. It was regarded as the equivalent of casting a spell on her. But the most revolutionary thing about the troubadours was that they did all this in the everyday language of the man in the street. And it just so happened that the troubadours lived in the region of France where instead of oui for yes, they said oc. It was known as the land of the oc, the Pays d'Oc, and the language spoken was Occitan. The French rap artists, les fabulous troubadours, inspired by these medieval poets, are spearheading a revival in Occitan poetry. So, Claude, what was so important about the fact they were doing this in Occitan?
For the troubadours, all the literature is in Latin, understood only by the aristocratic people. But when they sing and when they write in Occitan, everybody can understand. They make poetry in a common language of the people.
The language people are speaking in the street.
Yes.
The troubadours used the language of the man in the street for dazzlingly sophisticated intellectual games, like this verbal jousting match in which the two poets try to outwit each other with their rhymes and verbal dexterity.
The sophistication of the writing is very important, and the sophistication of the music also is very important for this period.
And did this poetry have an influence on Europe?
This poetry has